Dr. Hudson. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Dr. Catherine Stower, and I'm going to be presenting with Kimberly Procter White and with Sherry Bobbett. We have done extensive research, and the three of us have participated equally in the research. The development of the slides, I'm going to give the credit to Sherry and Kimberly for the wonderful job with the presentation. Um, as you already know, I'm a professor. Kimberly is a student learning more about the military culture, and Sherry is an active duty personnel member with the Army. So we have a really wide, diverse presentation for you today. I'm going to just give a little brief introduction to what we're going to hope to accomplish. For many of you that aren't real familiar with the military, we've been focusing on deployment cycles. That's the reason for our presentation, is that we wanted to take you a little bit more beyond those deployment cycles and show you what the rest of the world that works with military and the working military might actually look like. So we're going to be providing you with a very brief historical overview. Please don't exit right now when you hear historical. Just stay put. It's a very brief one. And then we're going to let you know about the current military culture. We're also going to identify several of those unique cultural constellations that might exist within any arena that you're working, if you choose to work with the military population. There are a lot of unique areas. We're going to help you recognize some of the common challenges that counselors will experience, not might, but will experience when they're working with military service members or their families. And we're going to help you identify some techniques and some processes that work with our military population and their families. And then finally, I know what every counselor in training and even experienced counselors like to see. They love those maybe innovative toolkit items that you can put in your counselor's toolkit and utilize for your own use later down the road. So without further ado, I'm going to bring it on into the first slide, which I believe Sherry is going to start discussing with you.
Thank you, Dr. Stower. I just want everyone to just take a moment and of your time this morning, and I want you to just think about what images are projected in your lenses when you think of the United States military. Is it battlefields of war? Is it death? Does it have to do with post-traumatic stress? And when you see a service member in uniform, do you utter the most common phrase, "Thank you for your service"? Do you notice the difference in stature? Are they standing tall, erect, hands to the side? Do you notice their appearance? Is their hair different, clean cut, not a piece of hair out of place? Do you notice their awareness? Are their eyes moving back and forth, taking a look around, trying to figure out the location, what's going on in the environment? And what about language? Do you often hear, "Yes, sir," "Yes, ma'am," "No, sir," "No, ma'am"? If so, you are among the millions of Americans and individuals who have sculptured the military and affirm that they are a diverse culture. The military is recognized as the most potent combat force in the world, and the United States Armed Forces has fought alongside its allies through precarious armed conflicts. They are comprised of the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. They're active, reserve, and National Guard, and they only amount to less than 1% of the population. But their presence is noticeable in over 170 countries around the globe. The military is a unique organization whose standard of professionalism may be unsurpassed. The universal values of military culture set aside personal needs that are inherent to specific values such as honor, courage, respect, integrity, selfless service, and excellence. This military culture is drilled into civilian candidates from the day they arrive at basic training, in which they are groomed to become leaders, take charge, and make vital decisions. The military is a multicultural society. and the aspects of their alliance is unbound. They are a small community whose primary purpose is to protect individuals and save lives. Their engagement in politics, negative solicitation of the organization, or shifting their standards of the profession may be minuscule from interest to retirement and beyond. Even after years of service, veterans may remain unburied to custom and tradition, meaning they don't know too much about the outside world. Yet through deployment and redeployment cycles, they train and retrain for readiness. They stay grounded in their career choices, which may range from medical, legal, infantrymen, logisticians, and finance specialists, and this is just to name a few. They maintain an undeniable cohesion that most may view as impenetrable. As counselors, the urge to work with the military population may not just be a career choice, but a commitment. Service members may expect the same universal values of culture that they have been presented to themselves throughout the ages. I want to share with you a brief review of the historical and current programs for military members and their families. We have the wives clubs beginning in the late 1700s for wives to get together and kind of relax and come and enjoy each other and their presence. We have the officer and non-commissioned officer clubs, which is geared more toward our enlisted and military personnel, in which activities such as promotion and also engagements are involved at these clubs. You have the family services, which provide unique opportunities from family members, and the Key Spouse program when they come together to discuss issues that are related directly to family. You have family support centers, and you also have our family readiness groups that is ready for our service members' families during deployment and during redeployment. Now I turn it over to Kimberly.
So we understand that counselors will receive general training in a lot of different areas, and typically their training is so that they can provide services to people from various cultural backgrounds. But we also understand that even with the types of training that counselors receive, sometimes they need specialty training in certain areas. And I found in a lot of the research that there are a lot of graduate programs that really don't touch on counseling military service members or even their families. So even service members will say that the courage, first of all, for them to even go seek counseling in the first place was one of the biggest hurdles. But then when they find themselves sitting in front of a counselor, they realize that a lot of times they can help them with basic or generalized issues. But when it comes to military specific needs, they find that a lot of the counselors that they're talking with do not have any kind of training, any kind of knowledge, and it can be frustrating for that service member. Part of that is understanding the lingo, and these are some of the things that Sherry had touched on, understanding the dress code, the behavior and mannerisms, understanding what the acronyms are that they use. And I think you all can kind of agree that sometimes when you're talking about something that you're very knowledgeable about, it can be challenging or frustrating at times to try to explain what that means to somebody. So military service members find that they're always having to explain what certain things mean when at that moment, that's not what they want to do. They don't necessarily want to educate that person. They want to be able to talk about whatever issues that are going on with them. So it's important for counselors to know the lingo, the acronyms, to know the different branches of military and not trying to clump them all into the same pot, because there are different needs and different guidelines and policies and procedures that each branch must adhere to. Additional information that counselors need to know is they need to know about what it's like to work with veterans. We have a lot of veterans who return back from deployment, some even from Vietnam, like decades ago, that are currently still seeking VA benefits, that are currently homeless, that have so many needs, but nobody has an answer for them, or they're always trying to kind of push them off to someone else. So it's important to know what kind of benefits are available for veterans in regards to medicine, in regards to employment and housing, and if they want to do continuing education, like what kind of resources are out there for them. Another factor in the culture is understanding, again, what that lingo is. So when you hear somebody say in the military, say PCS, well, they may understand it, but we don't. And so I've come to learn that PCS is a permanent change of station or being relocated to a different location. Another acronym is COP, which is Combat Outpost, and that is usually a base that's located outside, that's located in the hostile territory. And then there's just a long, long list. You can even find a lot of the acronyms on the Glossary of Military Acronyms, which is a website that has so many different definitions and things. And again, these same words may mean something different in each branch. Another factor is talking about the ethical and cultural diversity in the populations within the military. So the military culture is constantly changing. We are seeing that there are, differences in race and ethnicity, religion, gender identity, age, and additional factors. So we have service members who are serving that are from different religions and faith traditions. And right now, transgender individuals are at the center of the debate as to whether or not they even have the right to serve in the military. And part of that concern is, are they mentally stable to do that? Are they comfortable with how they identify? Because some of them are still, trying to grasp who they are and who they identify as. So, they're wanting to wait a period of time for transgender individuals to go through the mental process of seeking counseling and talking about their options and understanding the decisions that are in front of them. Other factors that they are concerned about is how does that work with medical care? You have transgender service members that may be undergoing hormone replacement therapy or are considering gender reassignment surgery. And of course, the biggest concern is safety. And we know that there is a safety issue for a lot of transgender individuals.
And speaking of our safety issues, we are aware that there has been a long discrimination history of LGBT people in the military. And it wasn't until Bill Clinton presidential campaign that the acceptance of gay and lesbian service members was addressed. And what came about that was DADT, Don't Ask, Don't Tell. But however, around 12,000 service members were discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell alone. And including in those discharged were those that were deemed dishonorable because of their orientation. But after much debate and filibuster on December the 18th, 2010, the Senate voted to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I am happy to share with each of you, because I realize that this may not be common to all, is that what most may be lacking in knowledge of is that on June 1st, 2016, then President Barack Obama issued a proclamation, number 8387, for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Pride Month. And the President pointed to the contributions made by the LGBT Americans, both in promoting equal rights and also regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, and in a broader perspective. He asked that the United States turn back discrimination and prejudice everywhere that it exists. In June, each June, from 2016 and forward, the military members join in a celebration with our fellow service members, and we honor our service members and their family, our LGBT service members and their family, and what we call hashtag DOD Pride. And when those service members and family members are honored, they are honored for their sacrifice and their service to the United States Department of Defense. And also regarding our transition from Don't Ask, Don't Tell, we have our trans military who has become very vocal in their voices to the DOD review process. and the legislation around the country explicitly targeting transgender people. Our Department of Defense extends benefits such as health care, which includes sex changes, basic allowance for housing, which Kimberly touched bases on as far as BAH, and that is extended to all married service members and is currently working to ensure that same-sex partners have those same right benefits for taxes, Social Security benefits, immigration, visa processing, and to the family support services and the resources that are around the Department of Defense. The efforts of the military in taking care of its family members may reflect a community that is very willing to ignore outside reflections. And although we remain silent in politics, we continue to be persistent in order to take care of our own and to maintain our professionalism.
So additional changes that are happening in the military is that we also have older adults who are enlisting. And typically when we think of, historical drafting, it was always males who were about 18 years old. And so throughout the decades, there has been changes in which there are some individuals who are waiting later to enlist in the military, some even after 35 years old. And again, as we talk about the differences in these branches of the military, each branch has their own cutoff age, but there are some who are older adults who are enlisting. And then we also have some who may have enlisted when they were young and they served and then they went back into civilian life for a period of time and then they wanted to re-enlist. So that's one of the changes, is that the ages are quite different. In addition to some people who are older enlist in the military because there is a greater need for people who have higher degrees and higher healthcare professional experiences. So, filling in the roles of doctors or dentists, pharmacists. These are all roles that high school enlistees do not yet have the training or the education for. Also, historically, it was always men who were the ones enlisting in the military. And of course, we know that there are women serving, but there are even more and more women that are serving. And a lot of them are stepping into what society considers the non-traditional roles. So typically when men went to the Army, the wife or the mother would stay home and take care of the home and take care of the children. But now we have females who are serving in the military who are also mothers and are partners or wives. So they are, having to leave behind their partners, having to leave behind their children in the care of either a male caregiver or in the care of other family members. So this can be challenging even for female service members who are single parents. Additional things is to know that there are blended families. So we do have some families where a step parent is deployed and the at-home parent has to take on new roles and responsibilities. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the later slides. But there are differences in scheduling and the changes in roles and responsibilities that must take place. But what can be challenging is that if maybe a step parent is deployed somewhere, sometimes they're leaving behind their families, and then sometimes the families are able to move with that parent. So if you have blended families, you may have to deal with legal appearances, legal fees, and court appearances in which maybe the other birth parent does not want their child to move to wherever the deployed location is. So those are things that not only is time consuming for a lot of families, but also has a lot of financial burden on some families. And then we also do have families where there are joint spouses who are deployed. So you have both parents who are deployed at the same time, which can be easy for some families, but it also has its challenges.
Understanding military finances can prove challenging to anyone, and that includes the service member. Service members may appeal to lenders because of their ability to set up what we call allotments And what allotments are just bank draft that comes directly from the leave and earning statements, or the LES. There is the security of payments through military contracts, job security, meaning that you contract your job position sometimes as far as 10 years. So this is a reliable source of income for lenders. There's also the access to the chain of command, meaning that there's someone that is they can always go to in order to speak with if there is a payment missed. And as far as to how the military pay goes, the basic amount is accessible for public view. So there's no guessing as far as to how much a service member may make per month, per year, and also any type of additional entitlements that the service member may make are all for public view. There is a recent legislation that was passed, that is attempting to be passed, that aims to disregard or scale back the enforcement of the law. And that was the law that was meant to protect service members from predatory lenders. And just to give you an example of how the military population is made up, is that 40% of the military population is 25 or younger. So if you go back and you think about your age of 25 or younger, how financially responsible were you during that time? And looking at the base salary of the enlisted personnel, they can range anywhere between $18,000 to $96,000 per year. For officers, who make up roughly about 17% of the population, you're looking at a annual salary of around $37,000 to $189,000 per year. But these numbers, as far as to their base pay, it does not include the entitlements or the additional pay that is based on duty locations. So these amounts may be higher at times. Combat pay, which is what you receive when you're overseas fighting wars. It doesn't include tax exclusion pay, which alleviates the tax amount from the base pay, which is also one of the items that I wanted to address, because most individuals assume that all military pay is untaxed. That is incorrect. Pay for military, base pay for military is taxable. It may be unwise for us to think that service member, again, have established credit worthiness or has established a financial sense, but understanding financial responsibilities may grow with time and assistance. The Department of Defense does offer several programs to assist in economic well-being. This is the Army Emergency Relief Program, and I may be a little biased. I am Army, so we have to take a look outside of the Army. There are special programs for each branch of service. There's also military pay advance, and this is across the Department of Defense. With the Department of Defense, what that does, it provides an interest-free loan to service member, and this often comes with PCS, or permanent change of stations, when the service member are moving from one area to the next. The program does offer these cash advances under emergency conditions, and the needs are to prevent a rise in debt and the possibility of job loss due to security clearances, because as a service member, your credit is tied to your job, to your career. Most service members may be hesitant to use the program, and that is because it's in close proximity of the base, and it's also in close proximity of the chain of command. So to assist counselors, the urgency is to become knowledgeable of the military pay system. Again, it is out on the website. And in order to help the service member, a sample LES is also out on the website. And this is in order to orient yourself to what is listed on the leave and earning statement, or if you want to call it the pay stub. It gathers that information and gives a much broader detail of what the service member pay and allowance is during that moment. And make sure the livelihood of the service member, such as the support of the spouse, who may have the inability to work and may be impacted by numerous transitions. The normal time limit that a service member may stay on station is between 2 to 3 years. So there may be that inability to get work and to get stable work. So the service member may often be the person that is providing the sole support. Make sure to look into children. There may be extended families where you have children that are not residing with the service member, but the service member still provides the support. And also the extended family members, which you may find that oftentimes the service member may provide services to parents or siblings during that moment. So the urgency is to look at all of those, ask counselors, and look at a full picture of the service members when discussing finances during the sessions. Some of the top reasons that the military members and families may seek counseling is marital and intimate relationships, meaning that not a lot of family members understand the jobs of the service members. When often you'll see the new family members come in, so they're not integrated yet to the style, the lifestyle of the military. So it may bring difficulty. Also, you have the deployment and reintegration, which is the absence of the service member, where we talk about the train and the retrain cycles, the always ready cycles, the stress and the stress management. Each time that the service member goes away, there is a stress level that goes with it, and that includes the family members as well as the service member. Also, there may be depression. The understanding that the environment that the service member has come from the deployment, and coming back to that environment, the service member has a possibility to be different, to react different, to think different, to react to the family in a different way. So oftentimes that may bring on depression. There's also the family dynamics, the parenting. Often you may find that the service member is not there during the birth of a child, or during graduations, or during times in kindergarten, being present at school activities. You may find this as very challenging for the service member and the family. And there may also be anger. And that anger just involves how the service member feels and how the family feels about the separation and the anxiety that is normal inside of the military population.
So when we think about talking a little bit more about the military families and, experiencing separation and what it's like when they are relocated and come back, a lot of times military families as a whole will find themselves feeling isolated from friends and loved ones, just because other people do not understand the culture of the military or the experiences that they had. And it's also challenging. So for spouses who want to find support in their family and friends, but they're not really able to understand what it's like to be part of that military world, or even what it's like to have a spouse or a partner who is deployed. Additional experiences that families have to go through is, talking about those fears and anxieties about the what ifs, how do they maintain those strong relationships with each other and the children while the service member is absent? How do you explain to children that mom and dad will not be around for a while, but it doesn't mean that they're not loved? And the most important question that families have to deal with is, what if the person never comes back, physically, mentally, emotionally? And when it comes to children, children can often be fearful, or they'll isolate themselves from the deployed parent when they return back. So some important things to watch out for when it comes to children is to understand that they may have some behavioral problems. Dr. Stower, go back a slide here. But they're talking about like the behavioral problems, such as acting out in home or in school. Sometimes there may be declines in academics or decreased interest in the things that they once enjoyed. Other things that children deal with is depression, anger or resentment. And for the younger children, there are temper tantrums or bedwetting and maybe even baby talk. So paying attention to those behavioral things are important for caregivers as well as even school officials to pay attention to for children who are part of military families. Additional things you can look for in children is to pay attention to their artwork, pay attention to what they're drawing. And a lot of times, as people who do play therapy, there's a lot that can be communicated even without speaking. So paying attention to what they're drawing, what they're writing about in their journal entries. Those are things that may give you a sign or give you some clues about what the children are experiencing. If that family member has been gone for an extended period of time, it is possible that a very young child has difficulty even remembering who that person is. So it may take some time to learn how to trust that parent or that individual. And then also think about male children, that if their father or if an older male sibling has gone off, been deployed, then that male child might now find that they are put into this role of having to be the head of the household or be the man of the house, if you will. And again, as Sherry had talked about, a lot of times when service members come back, they are not the same person who left. So families will often expect the service member to come back the exact same way that they left, but without them having enough knowledge and understanding, they realize that sometimes the person that they see return home has experienced some things that they can never explain, or for people to even understand what that's like. So it can be difficult for service members to immerse themselves back into civilian life. And again, as we talked about, if people don't understand what that military lingo is, then it can be challenging for them to talk about what they've been through or what needs they have if they always have to stop and explain what it is that they've dealt with. So we're going to go into the common challenges for counselors, which Sherry will discuss.
Well, some of our common challenges are limited or no exposure to military. Again, the understanding of the environment, the understanding that the outside world may be just as much as a challenge as counselors may feel that the inside world of the military is. And having this minimum exposure and having come into the military and adapted this type of environment may be difficult for counselors to try to penetrate exactly what is going on with the service members and their thought processes. So these are one of the challenges of the counselor. Another challenge we may see is terminology, understanding not just the basics of hua, which may be an introduction, or hoorah, which may be hello. There's different types of terminology that the military uses, and there may be an excessive amount of acronyms that are used. But again, these are available on most Department of Defense websites where counselors can actually become familiar. So if the service member speaks in a certain way, this is what they're saying because the terminology is totally different. So that information and that communication and getting to know the service member would actually become that the environment on an environment that the service member is familiar with. The biases regarding war. Removing biases may be difficult when you're looking on the outside of the installation or of the environment of the military, and that may be difficult because of the inability to understand or the limited exposure. So the perception of the service member at war or after war, that can be a hindrance for a service member to discuss or sit down with a counselor in order to better understand what they're going through. So it is very, very important to remove all biases when working with a service member. The counselor's toolkit, you're looking at unique client experiences, and you're looking at no client is the same. With regards to understanding the job skills and the job set and what the service member go through. Most of the time you would hear that each service member is an infantry person. You may hear that it is common. That's the training that is received in basic training. But as far as to when a service member is released from basic training, they each have a job set. They each have a job skills. So what they go through may be different. What each individual within that job set may be different. So it's important to understand that war or me wearing a uniform or any service member wearing a uniform does not relate to an overall picture of the United States Department of Defense. It is different for every person, every individual, and what they go through are from different aspects. But I do want to present that in this presentation, I do not speak for the Department of Defense. These are personal, and this is a lot of this information is personal information that I'm providing to you, and that is to assist you. We cannot possibly address the military culture in every branch. It is totally different. There are cultures within cultures. And most of all, we want to provide you some information that can assist you for their service members and their families. The information on the counselor's toolkit, just for example, it is strongly recommended that professional counselors and counselors in training make the adjustment for the specific needs of the clients that they are working with. A service member should feel comfortable with working with a counselor. A service member should feel like the counselor can relate to the information that they are providing. And this will help us to remember that each client is unique. And we also have to remember that one therapeutic approach does not work for every client. It is very important that continuing education, going to workshops, looking at books, videos, training, having the faith-based counseling there and providing those resources from Military Counseling Initiative. This is resources on and signs and symptoms of PTSD. Most service members will not tell you possibly that they have PTSD. They may not know that they have PTSD, or their courage will prevent them from going to a counselor and relating information of PTSD. Look at assessments and treatments. Also address the trauma and survivors' remorse. And this is not just for the service member, but for the family members as well, because family members are just as important as the service member. They're just as important as we are. And know your limitations. Collaborate with other professionals who have worked with service members, or collaborate with outside resources such as Department of Defense or Veterans Affairs. They are great resources when it comes down to discussing information or providing guidance on service members. And also make referrals. If all efforts of connecting with that service member, if all efforts have failed, if you just cannot penetrate that wall, which may be common for some, make all efforts to make referrals and make those efforts in mind of the service member.
And so there are also some helpful resources for spouses and partners. And one of those is to helping spouses and partners to focus on the here and now. And simply what that is just taking it one day at a time, understanding that, whether the deployed person is still, if you're in the United States, if they are still on a base in the United States, or if they are serving in another country, just understanding that the length of time may be short with some deployments and may be longer with other deployments. And so I think in a lot of times, if someone's going to be gone for years, they're looking at the extended amount of time as opposed to just, kind of working through it day by day. So definitely focusing on the here and now, maintaining family structure. That is so important, because not only does the deployment disrupt the schedule for the service member, but it also changes some things for the families or the spouse or partner. So maintaining that family structure, trying to keep routine, discussing the sharing of responsibilities, even as it pertains to the children, because if the deployed parent is away and the at-home parent is the primary caregiver, then it kind of puts them in the role of making all of the major decisions, or feeling that they're kind of, in a lot of cases, feeling that they're single parenting. So figuring out ways to continue to share responsibilities, to continue to have those expectations of the children or other family members, just like it was when everyone was there. Staying connected, that is so important, that even through deployments, and now that we live in a technology driven world, there is really no excuse not to be able to stay in contact with other people. However, we do understand that there are challenges at times when service members are deployed overseas. But if, writing letters or sending emails, doing video chats, there's so many different technological advances that we have today that weren't available to families 20 and 30 years ago. So there's so many different ways to stay connected. Another resource or another helpful tip is just to express those emotions and the feelings. As we had talked about, there are a range of emotions and feelings that the family members may experience, as well as the service members. So, talking openly about the anger or the sadness, the fear, the resentment, worrying about the what ifs, just being open with that will help them through the process. Another tip is to get involved, even with those, as Sherry had mentioned, there were wives clubs, or there were other family resources where people could get involved with other people who had a world like them, the military world. So even if you're not necessarily connecting with another military family, but there are other resources available, just to help them know that there are a support system that they can get connected to, in addition to staying active if they are part of a religious or spiritual affiliation, staying involved in extracurriculars for the spouse as well as the children, and doing some volunteer work, as well as just finding that new support system. And then finally, embracing the new normal. So again, there are changes in schedules, there's changes in responsibilities, there's changes in expectations. So embracing all of that is, it can definitely be challenging, but it can also help families grow stronger in their bond, because they're able to work through some of those challenges together, as opposed to feeling like they're doing it alone. So working through those changes, practicing self-care, understanding that the changes are going to be there, but the families or the spouses and partners will find their niche, and everything will continue to, again, just take it one day at a time. And then finally, we have resources for children and adolescents. And as I listed all of the different, or as I mentioned, all of the different behavioral issues that children will have, it is important to allow that space for children to be able to talk about their concerns. And when it comes to smaller children, they may not be able to verbalize that, or teenagers, really any age, sometimes just cannot always verbalize what they feel or what they're going through. So giving them those outlets to stay connected to friends, connecting them with other military children, in addition to working with the school, collaborating with them, so that, because the children spend the majority of time in school, having that open dialogue with teachers and the school counselors to say that, you're working together to note any kind of concerns that needs to be addressed. Giving them those outlets with extracurricular activities, allowing them to journal, to do artwork, anything that may allow them to express what they're feeling. And then again, as we talked about, maintaining contact with the deployed parent in whatever ways possible, and just allowing them to increase the communication between the family as an entire unit. And of course, getting involved. They can help with volunteer opportunities, or just anything that will help them, work through anything that they may be experiencing. And seek counseling. That, of course, is one of those things that if you have families that are hesitant to seek counseling in the first place, or feel that counseling is not for them for a variety of reasons, sometimes it takes the courage, or the actions of the adult caregivers to kind of get children to know that it's okay to ask for help, and to know that they don't have to go through those experiences alone. And there are also a number of websites that you can look to for children and adolescents resources that will help children in military families, as well as they even have for younger children. They have a Sesame Street page for military families. And so it just, helps them work through it on their level, and just allowing them to find creative ways to work through the process. And that concludes our presentation, and we will be open to any kind of discussion or questions, but we did have two questions. I think these are true and false ones, so anybody can chime in. Now, there is not a physical prize that you can get, but you can get the free prize of knowledge. So that is a gift that is the gift that keeps giving. So the first question is, the cultural aspects discussed were only from the historical perspective of military culture. Is that true or false? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone?
First one to type it in the chat gets the recognition.
You get that free prize of knowledge.
You are correct, SW. Who is SW? It was false.
Well,
All right.
can you say it again?
Sherry, do you want to read the second question? It's at the bottom, below the.
I have a lot of papers here. What challenges are noted when working with the military population? A, recognizing personal biases. B, limited or no exposure to military. Did somebody chime in? C, both A and B. D, none of the above. Dr. Stretch. Dr. Stretch.
Okay, Dr. Stretch got that one. No fair, Dr. Stretch. Okay, she's very competitive. We'll give her a break. Okay, Shani, thank you. I got the SW, and I'm sorry, AK, for the late buzzer. All right, that does conclude our presentation. So we'll take any questions that you have for the next 5 minutes, so to allow time for the next presentation to get ready.
I just want to say that as a former military spouse, that was awesome. Well done. Very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stretch.
Anyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. As somebody who has an 18-year-old daughter enlisting into the Marines this year, I just want to say thank you all. Thank you for teaching me some things that I didn't know, and I appreciate all the love and effort and strength and all the hard work that our military services do to protect us. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone.
Oh,
Thank
you're
you so
welcome.
much.
Thanks, Therese.
I do want to say this is a great opportunity to answer your questions about what truly goes on, and to relieve all doubts or whatever you were thinking, or even if it involved some of our first responders. A lot of times the environment is different, so it is a great time to open the door. And I don't know if I'll be here always as an active service member to answer your question.
I have a comment. Basically, I remember coming from deployment, and the big push when we're going from the outtake was to just get people off the rolls, basically, to get them back into regular working. And there was really no real type of psychological evaluation. It was really simple. And I saw firsthand how some people, that really affected them as far as them having outbreaks when they got back home because they were not ready to re-enter the civilian world. And also just going through the VA, dealing with that, there's a lot of youngsters that I don't see that's being properly taught. So do you know what is the military, what are they doing to make sure they have that correct training? Because really, I watched one of my friends die because they just didn't take him serious, or they did not have the tools to deal with it. And they just thought he was just lying and kind of avoid the symptoms of it. So how can you, what are your recommendations for that, to deal with that, or to even help someone who may be not getting the treatment that they deserve?
The system is currently, I am glad to tell you, and thank you for sharing that information. The system, our medical system, is now in overhaul. There is a pre-deployment and there is a post-deployment, how can I say, medical examination that you go through. And now you're actually appointed a specific physician to carry you through that processing phase while you're actually in the military. And once you get transitioned out of the military, they try to keep you with one provider. And what the military has brought about recently is that you can actually remain seeing those providers on post. You don't necessarily have to visit the VA. So if you have a condition that is not being treated appropriately within Veterans Affairs, you can actually go back to post, and they have expanded that medical care to be treated on post. I realize that some service member may not feel as comfortable, going outside of post and having these civilians, as they call it, and that is another terminology. Civilians just means not non-military. So there is a opportunity to remain on post and stick with your primary care provider instead of being sent off post, even though you have left the military. And that is what they're working on currently, because I am aware that a lot of service members may feel like they're just a number, or they may feel like that this is just a bag of medication that I'm being provided and I'm not being taken care of appropriately. So there are standards in place that will allow us now in order to see our service members on post instead of providing those services off post.
And from the perspective of the civilian spectrum, as Sherry identified, those who are non-active or non-reserve or non-guard, there is a lot of training and extensive training, and there have been several grants that have been utilized to train civilians or those that are in veteran status currently to work with other veterans. So there's like an outside-in movement, and there will be a balance, I hope. Ultimately, eventually, to lose just one vet is unacceptable. So I'm sorry for your loss, and I do thank you for your service. And I appreciate the question. We are running low on time here. I have about 5 minutes till the hour. I want to thank Sherry and Kimberly both for the significant amount of effort that they put in. I know we were all a little nervous about how this would go with three of us from very different perspectives presenting information, but I think we intertwined everything quite well. So thank you again. We appreciate your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stower. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Sherry.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording now.